Hey guys, tonight we're heading way back into the furnace-blasted lands of ancient Mesopotamia, where empires rise like sandstorms and fall even faster. You're standing barefoot on sun-baked stone, blinking against a horizon where the towers don't touch the sky just yet, but someone's working on it. His name? Nimrod, no last name needed. He's the kind of guy who builds cities before breakfast and dares the divine to stop him by lunch. His muscles flex when he whispers. His sandals probably squeak with authority, and he's about to teach you how rebellion gets baked into bricks. You probably won't survive this, especially if you're a rival king, a nosy priest, or a skeptical architect. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the dust of a newborn world, still drying out from the flood, where survivors are squinting into the sunlight, rebuilding life plank by plank. Among them is a figure who already seems out of step with mere survival. Nimrod. He's not wearing a crown, not yet, but he walks like the ground owes him something. The book of Genesis barely gives him a few lines, but those lines hit hard. He's described as the first on earth to be a mighty man, a mighty hunter before the Lord. And that's not before, like, in the sight of, it might mean in defiance of spicy stuff for scripture. You stand beside him now, squinting across Shinar, and it's clear this man isn't just hunting lions or antelope. No, he's hunting legacy, territory, power. He doesn't carry a bow just for show. It's both symbol and signal. You see folks whispering, some in awe, some in fear, most in both. One kid points and says, "There goes the king who never knelt." Here's your first historical anchor. The term mighty man echoes earlier figures like the Nephilim, those infamous hybrids of Genesis 6 who were part divine, part disaster. Nimrod isn't one of them, but he carries their flavor. Larger than life, drenched in myth, and destined to be misunderstood. Now tilt your ear a little. Listen closer. In the rustle of palm leaves, you hear other whispers, extra-biblical legends swelling around Nimrod like storm clouds. Jewish Midrash says he was the very king who tossed Abraham into a fiery furnace. Islamic tradition paints him as the arrogant fool who shot arrows into the sky to kill God and got a mosquito up the nose for his trouble. You can't make this up. Except, well, people did. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some Ethiopian traditions link Nimrod with the Queen of Sheba's lineage, as if even royal matchmaking wasn't safe from his influence. The dude gets around. Across time, across continents, across scripture, and yet historians still argue whether Nimrod was ever real. Was he a composite of kings like Sargon of Akkad or Gilgamesh? A myth layered over history like gold leaf on cracked clay? Maybe just a morality tale in hunter's clothing? No one agrees. The best part, no one really needs to. The legend walks whether the man did or not. You follow him now, slipping into his wake as he lays out plans not just for one city, but many. Babylon is a glint in his eye. Akkad and Uruk are breathy mutters between him and his inner circle. You're witnessing the blueprint of urbanization, the scaffolding of civilization's ego. It smells like baked clay and ambition. Let's pause a moment. Not everything is grand. You notice a scrawny scribe trying to keep up, dropping tablets and muttering curses. Someone in the back complains about the heat. Another trips over a foundation stone. You smirk because even in epic moments, there's always someone needing a nap and a fig. Nimrod's name itself is weirdly ironic. In Hebrew, it might derive from Merod, meaning to rebel. So yeah, his name may literally mean let's rebel. It's like naming your kid Trouble and then acting surprised when they build Babel. And let's talk about that phrase, a mighty hunter before the Lord. It's one of the most loaded lines in scripture. Some scholars say it just means he was really good at tracking wild beasts. Others insist it's political. He wasn't just hunting animals, he was hunting people. Power and prestige. He was organizing territory, inventing authority, flexing kingdom-building muscles. You pass a pile of deerskins, and then a freshly carved map etched into clay. Territories, borders, armies. This isn't just hunting, it's game theory with real blood. Nimrod doesn't sit on a throne, not yet. He paces, he preaches, he probably mutters in multiple tongues. You watch him teach a crowd how to make bricks with pitch and how to stack them so high. Even the clouds get nervous. One builder swears he saw the sky ripple. Now imagine being a farmer, or a potter, or some guy who just wants a goat market to go smoothly. And here comes Nimrod. yelling about walls, unity, glory, and punching the heavens in the face. You either join the dream or get steamrolled by it. That's the vibe. The sun is dipping now, casting long shadows across the foundation stones of Babel. You shiver, not from cold, but from the weight of what's coming. Empires always start with a whisper, and a wild-eyed man with big hands and even bigger plans. And Nimrod, he's just getting started. You follow the echo of Nimrod's footsteps across baked clay and smoky campfires, tracing the thread backward into the tangled roots of his origin. He doesn't just pop into history fully formed, muscles flexing and cities rising behind him. No, Nimrod comes from somewhere, his father is Cush, and Cush, he's a son of Ham, one of Noah's 3 post-flood boys, the same Ham who saw his father naked and kicked off a curse, a controversy, and about 10,000 theological side quests. You're standing now in the humid hush of a valley. Early morning mist curling like incense around stone altars and burnt offerings. Cush's people, the Cushites, are stretching south and east from the land of Ararat, where the ark supposedly landed. And they're not wasting time. These descendants of Ham are restless, ambitious, sharp-eyed and sharp-tongued. And somewhere in that swirl, a baby named Nimrod is born likely squalling, possibly already angry at God. Here's your historical nugget. Cush's descendants are often associated with regions in and around ancient Nubia and parts of Ethiopia. In other words, these folks are travelers, kingdom starters, caravan traders, people of heat and stone and river, so Nimrod's blood carries that fire. As for the name Ham, the scholarly world still bickers over what it means. Hot, maybe, or dark. Some even think it meant burnt. You chuckle because in a few decades, Nimrod will be scorching the earth both metaphorically and literally. So that tracks. You crouch in the reeds beside the young Nimrod now, a child already more interested in bows than bedtime. He doesn't listen to stories, he argues with them. He doesn't build sandcastles. He builds traps, pits, little walls to corral whatever wriggling animal he can find. There's a sparkle in his eye that says, let's see what happens when we don't follow the rules. It's not long before that curiosity turns to charisma. By adolescence, Nimrod isn't just good at hunting, he's legendary. Wild dogs follow him. He kills lions with a stare, or so the tales claim. One grandmother insists he once caught a leopard with his bare hands and taught it to heal. You glance over. The leopard's probably exaggerating. And here's the quirky bit. According to fringe traditions, yes, the kind that make mainstream scholars wince. Nimrod wasn't entirely human. Some say he had the blood of the Nephilim running through him, or was born under a cursed star, or even inherited divine anger through his lineage. Of course, those theories go from creative to conspiratorial real quick, but they're out there, lurking like old scrolls in dark corners of forgotten libraries. Meanwhile, the world is changing. Fast. People are clustering into clans. Territories? They're trading, warring, intermarrying. The Great Flood might be drying off the pages of collective memory, but its trauma still hums under everything. These folks want order, stability, safety. Nimrod. He wants more. He sees a map where others see fences. You ride with him now on a crude chariot of bent wood and creaky wheels, skimming past shepherds and shouting children. Nimrod's not smiling. He's scanning. He's measuring the land like it's a board game he's halfway through winning. He starts rallying men, not soldiers yet, but builders, hunters, dreamers. His speeches are short, sharp, sticky. We rise or we vanish, he says. The gods won't protect us, so we protect ourselves. Historians still argue whether Nimrod truly existed, or if he's a pastiche of several ancient kings molded into one mythic rebel. Maybe he's Sargon, the Akkadian ruler who united city-states. Maybe Gilgamesh, the semi-divine king of Uruk with a flair for drama and bad friendships. Or maybe, just maybe, Nimrod is something old or a tale told by mothers to warn their sons against the danger of too much ambition. You glance at him again. He doesn't look dangerous. Not yet. But danger doesn't always arrive with teeth. Sometimes it shows up with blueprints. At night, you sit beside the fire with him. He rarely sleeps. He draws symbols in the sand, diagrams of walls, towers, arches, and then, one night, he says it aloud for the first time. I will build a city where the gods will look up. You feel it, deep in your bones, that chill that comes when someone speaks against the order of the world. The others laugh. Cities are for cowards. They say, we move, we hunt. We don't tie ourselves down. But Nimrod, he smiles, you'll see. And you do, in the coming days. He leads a band of settlers eastward into Shinar, a wide land shimmering with promise and danger. The air smells like wet clay and sunburnt dreams. There, he marks a spot with his spear. Here. He says, we start here. The spot will become Babel. You lean into the breeze, and it's not just hot, it's full of dust. Pollen, destiny. This isn't just the story of a man anymore. It's the story of civilization picking up speed, veering towards something bold and probably foolish. You watch children stack stones. You watch elders frown. You watch Nimrod sketch again, lips moving silently, and you can almost hear it, the heartbeat of empire, thudding underfoot like drums in the dirt. The air thickens with heat and murmurs as you approach a plain so wide it seems to ripple with the curve of the earth. The land of Shinar sprawls before you like a blank canvas hot. Cracked, but promising, Nimrod stands at its center, arms crossed, surveying it like an artist about to commit something wild to stone. His eyes flick toward the horizon where no city yet dares to rise. You're here for the bricks, not just any bricks. These ones are revolutionary. No stone. No problem. These Mesopotamians cook their clay in fire, not sun. It's stronger, smoother, and perfect for one thing. Going vertical. You kneel beside a kiln where the heat lashes your face, and workers pull out perfect rectangles. Steam still curling from their edges. It smells like scorched earth and sweaty ambition. Nimrod doesn't just want to build a city. He wants a tower that punches the sky in the jaw. His voice carries over the din. Let us build a city and a tower with its top in the heavens. Here's your historical gem. The ziggurat was the skyscraper of its time, massive step temples that reached toward the divine. While we've never found the actual Tower of Babel, ancient Ur and Babylon had structures that could make a goat faint from altitude sickness. Ziggurats were sacred. Architectural flexes earth reaching up toward heaven, or at least enough to freak out the local priesthood. But this one's different. This one's not about honoring the gods. It's about outdoing them. You can feel it in the language. No altars. No prayers. Just declarations. You hear it over and over. Let us make a name for ourselves. That's the open secret no one dares say out loud. Nimrod's not just defying gravity, he's defying God. He organizes shifts, day crews, night crews, bricklayers, bitumen mixers, supervisors with beards too long to trust. He keeps the place humming with the rhythmic madness of ambition. You climb scaffolding made of palm trunks lashed together with rope and stare up into the dizzying future. There's no safety net. One wrong step and it's face first into fired clay. Someone below whistles and gestures that you're in the way. You move, dizzy, catching your breath. The sky looks closer than ever, like a thin blue curtain just waiting to be pulled back. Nimrod walks among the workers like a general. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. They follow him like shadows. You hear someone mutter, he speaks the tongue of every tribe. And maybe that's not metaphor. Here's your quirky twist. Some fringe legends say Nimrod had magical language skills able to speak with birds, animals, and all men in a world teetering on the edge of linguistic explosion. That would make him the last great translator before the confusion hits. And confusion is coming. You pass a crew arguing over measurements. Another over mortar consistency. A man swears he heard someone call a beam a bar. He doesn't know what a bar is. They scuffle. Nimrod watches it all. Expression unreadable. He walks away before it gets ugly. Or maybe because he knows it will. Historians still argue whether the Tower of Babel was a metaphor, an actual ziggurat, or a theological warning scribbled in clay. Some say it's based on the Edom and Enki, Babylon's giant ziggurat dedicated to Marduk. Others think it's pure allegory, God's way of humbling human arrogance. No one agrees. But you don't need agreement when you're standing here, wiping sweat from your brow, watching Babel's shadow stretch across the plain like it owns the sun. Night falls, and the stars come out. But the work doesn't stop. Torches flicker. Bats circle. Somewhere below, a woman sings a lullaby in a language you don't know. Or maybe you used to. The story says there was one language, one speech, a united humanity, and Nimrod. He's the accidental villain of that unity, or its champion. Depends who you ask. He stands now at the topmost layer, gazing upward. There's nothing left to climb except the sky itself. You stand beside him, wind tugging your tunic, and he whispers, "They'll never forget us." You believe him, because even now, thousands of years later, you remember the name Babel, the pride, the fall, the fire. A gust kicks dust into your eyes. You blink. When you open them again, the world feels like it's teetering, like gravity just flinched. And somewhere in the heart of the tower, The first syllables of 1,000 languages begin to split, like a fault line cracking beneath your feet. You're not sure exactly when it starts, but one morning, everything's off. The tower is still there, still rising like a fist into the hazy blue. But the rhythm is gone, the harmony gone. You hear a builder shout for a brick, but the guy beside him hands over a fish. Another screams back in confusion. Except it's not confusion, it's a totally different dialect. The mortar mixer throws his hands up. Someone else just starts laughing. Manically, you, standing in the middle of it all, are the only one still understanding everyone for now. Which means you're also the first to feel it. The unraveling. You look around and see chaos blooming in slow motion. Crews break into clusters. Friends eye each other like strangers. Fists clench. Tools drop. And the same question rolls in from 100 confused mouths in 100 mangled forms. What did you just say? This is where the legend flips. What began as the most ambitious architectural project in human history now morphs into a surreal comedy of errors. You watch a foreman, once so precise he could eyeball a stone's weight within a grain, now scream at a bricklayer who only blinks back, responding in what sounds like bird calls. Another man uses gestures so wildly the others think he's inventing a dance. Spoiler, he is not. Welcome to the confusion of tongues. It's not just language. It's coordination, culture, trust. Babel becomes a cacophony part building site, part babbling daycare. A guy swings a beam like a club. Two others just sit down and sob. The dream of unity, of collective greatness, melts under the sun like bad wax. Historians still argue whether this event symbolizes an actual fragmentation in history, maybe the division of tribal societies, or the scattering of dialects across regions. Others say it's purely mythological, a post-facto explanation for why Mesopotamians spoke Akkadian, Egyptians spoke Coptic, and nobody could agree on what counted as spicy. And what about Nimrod? You find him not shouting orders, but silent, standing amid the confusion like a statue chipped by disbelief. His shoulders sag, just slightly for the first time. He looks human. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some fringe traditions, it's not just language that splinters, but time, memory, even architecture. Some tales claim the top of the tower flew off into the heavens, or the base sank into hell, or it was struck by fire from the sky. Some even say the tower still exists, scattered in fragments across dimensions. It's the ancient world's version of a deleted file that still haunts the hard drive. Back in Shinar, though, things are unraveling fast. You move through a crowd that's no longer a workforce, it's a diaspora. People break off in every direction, east, west, north, south. Some leave in silence, others shout in brand new tongues, making up gestures as they go. Within hours, the plane that once buzzed with purpose now echoes with footsteps fading away. The city isn't dead, not yet, but its spirit, the thing that made it more than brick and bitumen, that's crumbling. You find a small child by a pile of unused bricks, turning them over one by one like puzzle pieces. She hums to herself in a tune you don't recognize. Maybe it's the beginning of a new language, or the last lullaby of the old one. And Nimrod, he disappears. Not like vanishes in a puff of divine smoke, though. Hey, some stories go there, but slips away into legend. Some say he fled to build new cities elsewhere. Others say he tried to rebuild the tower again, somewhere quieter. Still others claim he was cursed, turned into a beast, or swallowed by the earth, or doomed to wander babbling nonsense like everyone else. What's undeniable is this: the man who unified people with vision and fire now watches it scatter like ashes in wind. You pause at the edge of the plain, the ruined tower behind you, now no more divine than a ruined wasp's nest. The horizon is dotted with figures, wandering off, each one carrying a fragment of what used to be a shared world. Here's your mainstream fact. Language families like Indo-European, Afro-Asiatic, and Sino-Tibetan do show evidence of deep roots and migration. We don't know exactly when humanity's one mother tongue fragmented, but we know it did. Babel might be myth, but it's got a poetic foothold in the real mess of human history. As dusk crawls across the landscape, you turn to take one last look. The Tower of Babel doesn't fall with a crash. It dissolves with silence. It's not a smiting, it's a drifting apart. And in the middle of it all stands the ghost of a man who once told the sky to make room. The dust never truly settles in Shinar, but it softens. The noise fades to a low hush as the builders vanish, their scattered tongues echoing faintly like a dream you can't quite translate. In the silence, something else begins to rise, not the tower, but the city around it. Babylon, Nimrod's next move. You find yourself walking its early alleys, dodging ox carts and sun-drunk merchants, past freshly stacked bricks and walls that smell like they were cooked just yesterday. The tower is behind you now, but its shadow is long. Nimrod, never one to mope, has pivoted. If the heavens won't be touched, then the earth will be ruled. You see it in the layout, the walls, the gates. Babylon isn't chaos, it's control, measured, gridded, calculated. This isn't some dusty hamlet. This is a city built like a threat wrapped in geometry. Here's your mainstream fact. Babylon eventually becomes one of the greatest cities of the ancient world, famous for its massive walls, hanging gardens maybe, and its role in pretty much every Bible-themed dream sequence you've ever heard. But right now, it's just beginning, and Nimrod's fingerprints are all over it. He moves through the streets, head high, cloak dragging just enough to look regal, but not enough to collect trash. You trail behind him through half-constructed courtyards and newly dug canals. It smells of mud, sweat, and whatever passes for ancient ambition. But here's the twist. Nimrod's not building temples. He's building fortresses, towers with windows, not altars, storage rooms that double as war prep. The city breathes paranoia. You can almost hear the walls whisper. Try us. In a corner of the marketplace, a priest complains that there's no ziggurat yet. No gods here, he mutters. Just men with big voices. Nimrod walks past without blinking. He doesn't pray. He plans. And you notice something else. People still follow him, despite the tower, despite the confusion, despite or maybe because of the danger. Here's your quirky nugget. Some tales from Arab and medieval traditions say Babylon had underground chambers designed by Nimrod to survive another divine flood. Others claim he stocked them with food, gold, and scrolls of forbidden knowledge, an apocalypse prepper. 3. Whereas years early, you step inside one such chamber, a low-ceilinged vault lit by oil lamps. And yep, it feels like secrets. Carvings on the walls, not of gods, but of stars, maps, schematics, perhaps instructions on how to restart the climb. Should the heavens ever forgive him? Historians still argue whether Nimrod founded Babylon himself or was later linked to its rise by theological writers trying to weave a neat villain arc. Some credit Sargon or Hammurabi for the city's grandeur. Others shrug and say Nimrod is less about accuracy and more about archetype. The rebel, the builder, the man who dared and kind of succeeded. Above ground, Babylon starts to sparkle. Colored tiles, fresh-cut cedar. And everywhere, lions on banners, carvings, shields. You ask a guard why. He shrugs. Nimrod killed one with his hands. He says, maybe two. Whether it's true, doesn't matter. The image sticks. Nimrod, king of beasts and men. But there's tension, always, in the alleys, the courts, even the palace. You hear whispers that he's not aging, or that he is, but very slowly. Some say he talks to spirits now. Some say he's building something deeper than towers, something metaphysical. You watch him walk the palace gardens at night. Alone, he gazes upward, not with longing, but calculation. The stars aren't divine to him. They're dots on a map he hasn't finished drawing. Then one day, a fire, not divine punishment this time, just an accident. A kiln explodes. A child dies. The people grumble. Nimrod says nothing. He stares at the rubble, nods once, then doubles the size of the fire brigade. Progress doesn't pause for sentiment. And here's your callback. Remember those baked bricks from Section 3? Babylon perfects them. They're smoother, stronger, water-resistant. The city is practically waterproof, which makes sense if you believe another flood might be coming. You duck into a side alley and catch two boys mocking Nimrod in half a dozen languages. One impersonates him, shouting at heaven. The other pretends to shoot arrows into the clouds. You stifle a laugh. Then remember, some say that's exactly what he did. Launched arrows into the sky, demanding answers. When they rained back bloodstained. He claimed victory. Still, Nimrod doesn't speak of the tower anymore. But it's in his eyes, a ghost, a lesson. Or maybe a challenge he plans to revisit later. At night, you climb to a watchtower overlooking the Euphrates. Babylon glows below orderly. Disciplined, alive, and at its heart, a man who took failure, molded it like clay, and built an empire from its ashes. The heavens remain silent. But Nimrod, he's just getting started. The city doesn't sleep. And neither do you, not when Nimrod starts expanding like a storm front with ambition issues. Babylon was the spark. Now, the fire spreads. You feel it in the ground as you move east and south with Nimrod's caravans, past riverbanks and date palms, into lands where the horizon barely flinches before it's conquered. Next stop, Erech, or as the Sumerians might have called it, Uruk. You blink as towering mud brick walls rise out of the dust like they've always been there. But they haven't. Nimrod's fingerprints are all over this place too. Here's your mainstream fact. Uruk is one of the earliest known cities in human history. Yes, real, excavated, documented. It's credited with inventing things like writing, bureaucracy, and because we can't have nice things, taxation. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest pieces of literature we have, was born here. And some people still wonder, was Nimrod Gilgamesh in disguise? We'll get to that. Right now, you're walking the wide boulevards of Uruk, past scribes scratching cuneiform onto clay tablets, past temples with walls inlaid with glittering stones, past soldiers polishing bronze blades. Nimrod's empire isn't subtle anymore, it's organized. You watch him review troops on horseback, gesturing toward a horizon no one else dares to point at. Behind him, plans are being drawn literally, city layouts, canal networks, road systems, trade routes that snake toward the edges of the known world. And then, Akkad. You travel northwest with the army, across windswept plains where bandits used to rule. Nimrod doesn't conquer with brute force. He overwhelms with infrastructure. His builders arrive before the soldiers. Canals are dug before banners are raised. You arrive in what will soon be Akkad, and you already smell the foundation oil on new city stones. Now, let's get weird. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some obscure traditions say Nimrod didn't just build cities. He cursed the ground before building, taming it with blood sacrifices or dark rituals to bend nature itself. A bit dramatic. Sure, but hey, how else do you explain cities popping up where no sane farmer would dare pitch a tent? You walk a freshly carved boulevard flanked by looming statues, lions, bulls, some creature you think might be half scorpion. Nimrod's presence is subtle now, more like a signature than a speech. These cities speak for him. The stones bear his name. Historians still argue whether Akkad was actually one of Nimrod's projects, since the historical record places its golden age a few centuries after his biblical cameo. But it doesn't matter here. In the myth, he's the architect of empire. Full stop. And it's not all marble and muscle. You see markets teeming with goods. Lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, cedar from Lebanon, copper from Oman. Nimrod's trade network is absurdly advanced for a post-flood world. You overhear deals in 6 dialects, curses in 9, and somewhere, a drunk trader insists he once played dice with a man who claimed Nimrod never sleeps. You believe him? You stop in Kalne, a lesser-known blip on most maps, but one that Nimrod circles like it's his pet project. Not as grand as Babylon, not as storied as Uruk, but strategic. Kalne is the knot that ties his other cities together, a relay post, a control center. You pass a tower bristling with signal fires and think, Nimrod doesn't build monuments, he builds networks. It's starting to get eerie how fast these places rise. You camp beside a city wall that wasn't there yesterday. At night, under the stars, you hear the creak of pulleys, the chant of workers, the grind of stone. And you realize this isn't an empire anymore. It's a machine, and Nimrod, he's the engine. You catch a glimpse of him in Kalna's administrative quarter. He's poring over a set of clay tablets, lips moving in multiple languages at once. His eyes flick up as you pass. Not surprised, not welcoming, just aware, like he's keeping score. You try to keep your sense of humor. One man swears Nimrod owns a pet hyena that can detect lies. Another claims he caught Nimrod arguing with a statue and losing. Someone else says he once laughed. Just once, back when the tower was still climbing. Here's where it turns. Not all the cities thrive. Some burn. Some rebel. Some are swallowed by river floods or famine. Nimrod doesn't flinch. He rebuilds, or leaves them to rot, starting fresh elsewhere. His obsession isn't any one city, it's the system. The idea that you can build order out of wilderness. You stand at the edge of a canal in Akkad now, watching cargo boats drift past under a setting sun that turns the water gold. Behind you, a priest mumbles blessings over a stone idol. Ahead of you, a caravan heads west, toward yet another foundation site. You could follow it. You probably will, because where Nimrod walks, cities follow. And you're not entirely sure if he's leading humanity into greatness or straight off a cliff built from bricks. You're curled up on a stone bench, your feet blistered from marching through Nimrod's growing empire, when a scholar plops beside you with a tablet tucked under one arm and a smug grin that screams, I know something you don't. He glances at the city skyline, maybe Babylon, maybe Akkad they're starting to blur, and says, you ever wonder if Nimrod wasn't Nimrod at all? You groan internally. Another theory, maybe, he says, tapping the clay. He's Gilgamesh, or Sargon of Akkad. Or maybe just a composite, a mythic mashup of every king who ever got too big for his sandals. You sit up because, well, he might be onto something. Let's start with Gilgamesh, that famous king of Uruk. 2/3 divine, 1/3 mortal. Kind of a mess, but undeniably epic. The guy who tamed wild beasts, wrestled forest demons, and searched for eternal life like it was on sale. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Epic of Gilgamesh dates back to the 18th century BCE, give or take, and its titular hero was likely a real king around 2700 BCE. Gilgamesh ruled Uruk, which, remember, was one of Nimrod's claimed cities. Coincidence? Maybe, but in a world of oral tradition and myth recycling, those lines blur fast. Gilgamesh was also known as a city builder, a hunter of beasts, a semi-rebel against the gods, and yeah, someone who built big towers. Remind you of anyone? Now here's your quirky tidbit. Some fringe theories say the Tower of Babel was originally a Sumerian ziggurat, and that Gilgamesh, or someone like him, attempted to reconnect with the gods through it, not to defy them, but to literally climb back into heaven, not rebellion, just homesickness. A celestial family reunion that went very, very wrong. You rub your temples as the scholar launches into his next favorite comparison. Sargon of Akkad. Sargon, the great unifier, ruler of one of the first true empires in recorded history. Born low, rose high. Conquered with brains and brawn. Created cities. Minted order. Probably invented overworking. Sound familiar? Here's the thing. Historians still argue whether Sargon and Nimrod were ever confused intentionally, or if later, biblical writers retroactively squished them together into one legendary power figure. It wouldn't be the first time a bunch of scrolls played Frankenstein. You wander a library built under Nimrod's watchroom after room of tablets. Legal codes, building plans. Genealogies so long your eyes cross. A scribe shows you one clay fragment that references a ruler who walked with the gods, but spoke like men. No name. No the sea, just mystery. It's hard not to see Nimrod in it. You lean over a table stacked with translations, and it hits you, Nimrod might not be a person. He might be an idea. The idea that civilization comes at a cost, that greatness is tied to pride. That every empire stands one brick away from divine judgment. The scholar beside you nods solemnly and says, it's less about who Nimrod was and more about what he represents. You roll your eyes, but you know he's right. Mostly. Still, you want details? A face, a biography, something solid. But Nimrod refuses to stay put. One scroll paints him as a tyrant, another calls him a hero. One says he enslaved nations, another says he protected them. It's like trying to draw a shadow using only smoke. Even today, archaeologists still dig through the ruins of Mesopotamia, hoping to pin down anything that proves Nimrod was more than a story. A tomb, a carving, a shopping receipt. But so far, nothing definitive. Which means you're stuck wandering between maybes. Maybe Nimrod was Gilgamesh with a new code of theology. Maybe he was Sargon, exaggerated and mythologized by generations who forgot his name but remembered his empire. Maybe he was just every loud, brilliant, reckless man who ever tried to stack ambition higher than wisdom. You walk out of the library into the dry night air. The stars above twinkle like the eyes of gods who've heard this story before. They don't offer answers. Behind you, the scholar yells one last theory. Maybe Nimrod is the tower. You don't look back, because you're starting to feel it too. Nimrod isn't flesh anymore. He's mortar. He's myth. He's the weight of every city that got too tall, too fast, too proud. And he's not done with you yet. Night falls heavy over a quiet valley, and in the flickering torchlight of a low-burning fire, you finally find yourself face to face with another piece of Nimrod's legend, a very different piece. This one doesn't rise in bricks or blaze in military glory. This one burns in Midrash and whispers of ancient defiance. You've left the cities behind, for now. Slipped past the chatter of builders and governors into the territory of sacred story. You're entering the tension between Nimrod and another biblical titan, Abraham. And trust me, things are about to heat up, literally. The version of Nimrod in Jewish Midrashic tradition isn't just a king, he's the king. The king of kings, the guy with the gold throne, a big crown, and an even bigger ego. He's not content to build cities. He wants to own the sky, the soil, and the souls in between. So what happens when a certain shepherd from Ur starts preaching about one invisible god who isn't impressed with towers? You guessed it. Conflict. Here's your mainstream anchor, Abraham. Originally Abram, hails from Ur of the Chaldees, a real ancient city-state in Mesopotamia. It's not far-fetched to imagine him and Nimrod breathing the same dust, stepping through the same marketplaces, brushing past each other in the swirl of ancient politics. Now, the Midrash kicks it up a few notches. According to these rabbinic stories, young Abram smashed his father's idol shop, literally broke all the statues, and blamed it on the biggest one. Nimrod, of course, catches wind. The king doesn't take theological rebellion lightly. Bow to fire. Nimrod says, "No," says Abram. "Then burn in it," says Nimrod. So yeah, into the fiery furnace goes Abraham. In a scene that reads like something between a divine test and a fantasy novel, Nimrod has him thrown into the flames in front of the entire court. People cheer. It's a whole thing. But Abraham, he doesn't sizzle, doesn't even sweat. He walks out untouched, cool as morning dew. Here's your quirky twist. One tradition claims the angel Gabriel personally stepped in to shield Abraham from the fire. Another says the flames themselves refused to harm him, out of awe. Either way, Nimrod loses face hard. You watch from the crowd as the mighty king stares at the man he just tried to cremate, blinking through heat haze and embarrassment. The crowd gasps. Someone faints. Nimrod doesn't say a word. But you know that look. That's not repentance. That's rage being rewritten into long-term revenge. Historians still argue whether this whole confrontation was a later invention, an allegory meant to contrast monotheism and polytheism, or to show Abraham as a bold truth-teller unafraid to challenge the state. But Midrash doesn't care about historicity. It's after meaning, and the meaning here is clear. Nimrod represents the empire of man, Abraham. The faith of God, you sneak behind the palace later that night, watching as Abraham gathers his things, slinks out of the city, and disappears into the wild. He's got no army, no riches, just conviction and a seriously fireproof track record. Meanwhile, Nimrod fumes. He orders more statues, bigger furnaces. He builds temples to the sun, to fire, to anything that will obey him. He starts hunting, not just animals this time, but ideas, dangerous ideas, the kind that spread like embers. And yeah, some versions of the tale say Nimrod becomes obsessed with Abraham after this. He chases him, tries to track him across deserts, sends spies. One story even says he uses astrology to predict Abraham's birth and tries to have him killed as a baby. Misses, obviously. You wonder if Nimrod sees Abraham as a threat or a mirror. Both builders, both leaders, both unwilling to bow, but only one sees himself as a god. The tension is so thick you could carve it with a bronze blade. You sit in on a council meeting where Nimrod fumes about sedition. They'll worship stars next, he growls. They'll forget who made the cities. Who made them? Someone coughs politely. No one disagrees. And yet, the legacy is lopsided. Nimrod builds and burns. Abraham walks and waits. But one becomes the father of nations. The other, a footnote in scripture, expanded only by legend and suspicion. That's the cruel irony. Isn't it? Nimrod writes his story in stone. Abraham writes his in sand, and it outlasts the towers. As you walk out of the ruined throne room, you hear a story being told in a side alley. A mother is whispering to her child, when the world turned cruel. One man said no, and God listened. You don't need to ask which man she means. Behind you, the flames of Nimrod's furnace flicker one last time and vanish into ash. Dawn breaks over a new landscape. And you've crossed into a different kind of heat, the kind that shimmers in mirages and stirs in prophecy. You're no longer in Babylon or Uruk now. The ground feels older, the legends thicker, and the silence before each prayer longer. Welcome to the world of Islamic tradition, where Nimrod's name still echoes, but as Namrud, a proud tyrant who dared challenge a prophet, and heaven itself. You're crouched near a desert campfire, listening to a recitation of stories not from Genesis or Midrash, but from the Quran and Hadith, Islamic sources that give Nimrod a different stage and a new adversary. Ibrahim, that's Abraham, reintroduced, renamed, and just as fearless. The story goes like this. Ibrahim preaches about the one true God. Nimrod here laughs. I am God, he says. I give life and death. Then, in a move both petty and horrifying, he brings out two prisoners. He kills one, frees the other, and turns to Ibrahim like, boom, your move. But Ibrahim doesn't blink. He counters, my Lord causes the sun to rise from the east. Make it rise from the west. Silence. Awkward. Cosmic. Nimrod has no comeback. He just fumes. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Quran doesn't name Nimrod directly, but Islamic commentators including early scholars like Al-Tabari, identified this unnamed king as the same figure from Genesis, just with a sharper edge. In Islam, he's not just a rebel. He's a symbol of arrogance against Tawheed, the oneness of God. And now for your quirky gem. In one Islamic legend, Nimrod, furious that God won't answer his challenges, takes it up a notch. He builds a tower sound familiar, and fires arrows into the sky, real arrows, into the clouds, as if heaven was something you could shoot down. And here's the punchline. Some versions say the arrows came back, covered in blood. Nimrod dances. He thinks he's won. God watches. He's not amused. Historians still argue whether this Islamic Nimrod is a theological borrowing from Jewish and Christian sources, or a reimagined fusion meant to personify ultimate tyranny. Some say he's a narrative foil set up to highlight Ibrahim's calm defiance. Others say he's a stand-in for every oppressive ruler in early Muslim history, dressed in ancient garb but whispering familiar threats. You travel with a caravan through the sands now, where traders chant prayers and tell tales of Nimrod under the stars. One leans close and tells you the most delicious bit of mythological mischief. Nimrod didn't die in battle. He didn't die in fire. He died by a mosquito. Yes, really. According to this legend, God sends a tiny mosquito small, insignificant, annoying to fly up Nimrod's nose. The bug burrows into his skull, gnaws at his brain, and drives him slowly mad. Some say it buzzed until the end. Others claim he begged his guards to smash his head with a hammer, just to make the buzzing stop. Death by divine bug. Irony at its sharpest. You walk through a village where children reenact the story. One kid wears a crown of reeds, declaring himself king. Another hums and flaps like a mosquito. The king staggers, wailing, clutching his head. Everyone laughs. You can't help but smile, because there's something deeply poetic about it. The man who built towers and claimed godhood is undone not by an army or a prophet, but by the smallest of God's creations. A whisper with wings. In the distance, you hear the call to prayer, 5 times a day. Across cities, mountains, and oceans, Ibrahim's name is spoken with reverence. Nimrod, a cautionary tale, an object lesson, a bug-bitten footnote. Still, his myth lingers. Some Islamic texts say Nimrod was one of 4 world kings who ruled the earth. Too good, too evil. Solomon and Dhul-Qarnayn on the good side. Nimrod and Nebuchadnezzar on the, let's just say, not great side. And while he's long dead, figuratively squashed, his arrogance is eternal. You watch the sun set over the dunes, where no tower dares to rise. The wind sighs. The stars appear, somewhere out there. Perhaps Nimrod's soul still paces, trying to find the sky again, swatting at divine mosquitoes. You wake up under a starlit sky, wrapped in a scratchy cloak, and the creeping realization that Nimrod might be more than one man, or even more than a myth. He's beginning to feel like an archetype, a story shape that echoes across cultures, centuries, and conspiracy-laced coffee shops. So tonight, you set out to answer one deeply irritating question. What was he really? Hunter, king, rebel, idolater? You start walking, not toward any specific city this time, but through the collective imagination of humanity. First stop, the old hunter campfires, where Nimrod first earned his title as mighty hunter before the Lord. That phrase still lingers like smoke. Here's your mainstream fact. Ancient kings were often lion hunters as a public relations move. It wasn't just sport, it was symbolism. Killing dangerous beasts meant you were tough enough to rule humans too. In Assyria, kings had entire murals carved of themselves, stabbing lions through the heart while wearing full eyeliner and zero fear. So when Genesis calls Nimrod a mighty hunter, it's not talking about squirrels. But scholars still argue, was he hunting beasts or men? Some say hunter was a metaphor for conquest. Empire building? Grabbing territories like a board game where the dice always roll in your favor. Others think it's spiritual hunting souls, dragging people away from God toward, well, him. Which brings us to idolatry. Nimrod is often blamed for it. In several Jewish and Islamic traditions, Nimrod isn't just a rebel. He's the one who introduced idol worship post-flood. Like, hey, you know what would be fun? Forgetting God and bowing to this really stylish rock instead. A trendsetter of bad theology. He may not have invented false gods, but he definitely made them popular. One tale claims he saw the sun rise and worshipped it, then the moon, then the stars, until he got bored and decided he should be worshipped. You have to admire the progression from spiritual curiosity to full-blown egomania in 3 easy steps. And then there's the rebel angle. Not just against God, but against the natural order. You recall the tower, the fire, the shouting at heaven. Nimrod doesn't rebel in whispers. He builds his rebellion with bricks. Come get me. He seemed to say, here's your quirky bite, in some Ethiopian Orthodox legends. Nimrod didn't just rebel, he tried to rewrite the laws of the universe. One fringe version says he attempted to recreate the flood in reverse, by damming rivers and draining the earth instead of drowning it. Like a toddler with divine Legos, rearranging the world to suit his mood. You sit down on a sand dune and look up at the stars, wondering what kind of man provokes this many interpretations. Some cultures made him into a devil, others into a demigod. A few, brace yourself, painted him as a hero. Yes, in a couple of medieval Armenian and Eastern Christian traditions, Nimrod is seen less as a villain and more as a wise king who built cities, maintained order, and even if he was a bit cocky, meant, well, just misunderstood. Historians still argue whether these positive spins are relics of old national myths trying to reclaim a famous figure, or just the result of the old villains or cool bias. Either way, you're left staring at a character who's less man and more mirror, because that's the trick, isn't it? Nimrod reflects what you fear, or desire, or admire. To tyrants, he's a cautionary tale. To revolutionaries, a blueprint. To theologians, a warning. And to conspiracy theorists, well, buckle up. You duck into a tent on the edge of a caravan stop, where a man in dusty robes unrolls a map that looks more like a spider web. Here, he says, pointing at ancient Babylon, is where Nimrod ruled. He draws a line to Rome, another to Washington, D.C. You try to object, he shushes you. There are Nimrods in every age, he says. You back away slowly. Outside, someone's singing an old folk song. You can't understand all the words, but the chorus is clear. He built too high. He flew too close. He fell too far. And suddenly, it clicks. Nimrod is the rebel archetype, the proto-tyrant, the anti-Abraham, the man who refuses to kneel, not because he's evil, but because he thinks he knows better. He's ambition in a human shell. You start walking again, the wind whispering around your ears. And for a moment, you think you hear his voice, not shouting, just watching, not gone, not quite. You're back in the shadow of a tower, or what's left of it. Not the real Babel. Mind you, that one crumbled centuries ago, and probably didn't even look the way you imagine. No, this is a painting, a canvas the size of a wall. In the corner of a dusty European museum, you're staring up at Peter Bruegel the Elder's Tower of Babel, a 16th century fever dream of spiraling bricks and very poor construction management. And just like that, Nimrod is back in business. You shift on your feet, staring at the detail. Thousands of tiny figures building the impossible. A king-likely Nimrod stands at the bottom, gesturing skyward like, yeah, stack it taller. You look around. No angels, no smiting, just hubris in progress. This isn't just art. It's memory, a ghost story for civilizations. Because the Tower of Babel didn't stay in the Bible. It refused. It crept into culture and politics, architecture and language. It became the metaphor that never dies. Here's your mainstream fact. The Tower of Babel, despite minimal biblical airtime, became one of the most iconic symbols in Judeo-Christian thought. And not just religious thought, political too. Over the centuries, Babel represented arrogance, empire, confusion, and sometimes globalization gone wrong. You step into a church, Latin phrases carved above the doorway. Inside, stained glass shows a crumbling tower next to a humbled crowd. Look what happens when man challenges God, the priest whispers. You nod. Though you're secretly thinking about how many tech CEOs would still give it a go, Babel never left us. It just changed forms. You scroll through your phone. Yes. You still have one. And yes, reception is miraculously fine and see it again. A magazine cover comparing a tech campus to Babel. A skyscraper proposal labeled Nimrodian. A meme with a confused emoji, and when your group project fails like the Tower of Babel, it's everywhere. Even in fiction, Babel shows up wearing new clothes. In sci-fi, it's a space elevator gone wrong. In fantasy, a sorcerer's tower. In dystopia, a monument to a fallen utopia. Writers can't resist. Because Babel isn't just a location, it's a warning label. And Nimrod, he's the guy who ignored it. Here's your quirky twist. In the 20th century, totalitarian regimes were often compared to Babel grand ambition, centralized control, eventual collapse. Soviet architects were even accused of Babel thinking one planned to build the palace of the Soviets. Taller than any church, almost literally in the ruins of a cathedral. Sound familiar? Historians still argue whether the Babel story is a critique of technology, unity, or just really bad project management. Some say it's anti-urban propaganda. Others say it's about linguistic diversity being a gift, not a curse. A few even suggest it's a dig at Babylon's historical obsession with giant buildings. Whatever it is, it's stuck. You walk through a library and find Babel again, this time in Jorge Luis Borges' story, The Library of Babel. A bizarre, infinite structure filled with every possible book. Knowledge gone mad. It's not bricks this time, but information, and it's just as dizzying, you whisper to yourself. He built too high, and the librarian gives you a look. You think about how modern cities rise, how architects talk about piercing the skyline, how billionaires race to space like Babel had a sequel, no one authorized. It's not bricks and mortar anymore. It's code, rockets, satellites. And Nimrod, he'd be proud. You turn on the TV in your hotel room, and there it is. A commercial for a new megatower in the Gulf. Floor after floor rising above the clouds, a tower like no other. The narrator says, a legacy in the sky. You mutter, so is Babel? And here's the delicious irony. These towers, they're global collaborations. Architects from Sweden, engineers from Korea, investors from Dubai. The confusion of tongues reversed, but the ambition still vertical. You glance out the window at the blinking skyline. Somewhere, maybe Nimrod's watching. Not furious, not jealous, just amused, because the tower never really fell. It just evolved, and it's still rising. It's late now. The kind of late where your thoughts go sideways, and the line between sacred text and Saturday cartoons gets blurrier than you'd like. You've seen Nimrod the hunter, the king, the rebel, the villain, but now brace yourself. You're about to meet Nimrod the punchline. Yes, somehow, the mighty builder of empires ended up in the same cultural orbit as Bugs Bunny. You stretch out on a couch, feet up, remote in hand, flipping through old TV clips when you stumble onto the scene. Elmer Fudd walks onto the screen, hunting bugs. Bugs Snickers. What a Nimrod. Wait, what? Here's your quirky bombshell. That insult, that Nimrod equals idiot thing, it's a misfire of biblical proportions. Literally, in that 1940s Bugs Bunny cartoon, Bugs is mocking Elmer's terrible hunting skills, sarcastically comparing him to the mighty hunter Nimrod. But viewers didn't get the reference. They just assumed Nimrod meant dumb, and from there, it stuck like gum on a sandal. Congratulations. You just watched one of the most unlikely etymological rebrands in pop culture history. You laugh. But then you realize it's kind of tragic. You remembered Nimrod standing in Shinar, measuring the sky with his gaze, laying the foundations of cities that changed the world, and now he's a joke. A name hurled at drivers who cut you off. A schoolyard taunt that has zero clue it used to mean lion-slaying empire builder. You head to a bookstore. Search Nimrod. You find a Canadian literary journal, a sci-fi spaceship in some old pulp novel, a 1980s British fighter jet, and, yes, an online slang dictionary listing Nimrod as idiot, moron, dummy, from mighty to meme. That's a fall worthy of a second tower. Here's your mainstream fact. In English literature before the 20th century, Nimrod still meant a mighty hunter. It shows up in everything from 18th century sermons to Victorian hunting poems. It wasn't until Looney Tunes that the shift began slowly. Subtly, cartoonishly, you pull out your phone and dive into internet culture. Nimrod memes, Nimrod gifs, a subreddit where someone earnestly asks, who TF is Nimrod anyway? The top reply, some Bible guy who built a tower and got smacked by God. Close enough-ish. You scroll through music next. There's Nimrod, a 1997 Green Day album. Edgy. Distorted, rebellious, probably not a direct reference. But the name hits different now that you know the backstory. You wonder if Billy Joe Armstrong was making a cheeky dig at authoritarianism or just liked the sound of it. And then you find it, again, in X-Men comics. Yes, X-Men. Nimrod is a futuristic mutant hunting robot from the Marvel Universe. A pink and purple, overly polite. Time-traveling Terminator. It's wild, it's weird, and it's weirdly perfect. Because Nimrod, in this version, doesn't just chase mutants. He enforces order, no matter the cost. He's empire in armor. You pause. Think about that. Even when reduced to a comic book cyborg, the core Nimrod vibes remain. Power, control, a little too much certainty. History recycled into tights and lasers. Historians still argue whether pop culture ruins myths or revives them. Some say we cheapen legends by turning them into jokes. Others say jokes are just myths with better punchlines. You're starting to think both can be true. You walk past a high school classroom where students are half listening to a lecture about ancient Mesopotamia. The teacher says Nimrod, and someone snickers. The teacher sighs. No, he wasn't dumb. He was actually quite powerful. The class rolls its eyes. You sit at the back and whisper, he built cities, challenged heaven, took on Abraham, and lost to a mosquito. They might not listen now, but maybe one day they'll look him up, see past the cartoon, find the fire, or maybe not. Maybe Nimrod's fate is to be remembered not as he was, but as we needed him to be a warning, a warrior, a wannabe god, or just a funny name on a Saturday morning rerun. Either way, he endures. You're standing in the middle of an open dig site now, where the heat bounces off limestone and sunburned archaeologists curse gently under their breath. There's no drama here. No roaring furnaces or blood-stained arrows from heaven, just dust, data, and the relentless hum of a generator powering a shaky laptop. This is where the legend of Nimrod hits the hard wall of reality. You tiptoe through square trenches, peering into history's half-open tomb, fragments of pottery, mud brick foundations, maybe a cuneiform tablet or two. You feel it, the quiet desperation of people trying to prove a myth. Because let's be honest, everyone wants to find Nimrod. Here's your mainstream historical truth bomb, despite all the stories. There is no definitive archaeological evidence for a specific historical figure named Nimrod. Not one statue, not one carving, not even an engraved bathroom tile that says Nimrod was here. His cities, sure, Babylon, Akkad, Uruk, those are real. But the man himself, still hiding. And oh, people have looked. You crouch next to a dig supervisor flipping through notes. He's got a theory. Of course, everyone does. Maybe Nimrod was a later myth layered over real kings. Maybe his name was symbolic from the beginning. Maybe he's buried deep beneath layers we haven't even touched yet. He shrugs, wipes his brow, and mutters, or maybe he never existed at all. You walk away before that thought gets too loud. Because across the valley, another team is digging near a ziggurat's base. And here's your quirky twist. A few conspiracy-flavored fringe theories claim Nimrod's actual tomb is under the ancient city of Nineveh. Yes, the one famous for Jonah and the whale. Some even whisper the U, as military secretly uncovered it during the Iraq War and whisked away something ancient. No evidence, just internet breadcrumbs and goosebumps. Still, the appeal is strong. Imagine it, a tomb beneath a buried tower, guarded by curses, filled with lost technology and half-melted maps of Babel. It practically writes itself. Indiana Jones. Meet Genesis 10. But reality. Reality is less cinematic. You spend the day dusting off a broken clay pipe. The highlight is a small stone seal. Maybe Sumerian. Maybe Akkadian. It depicts a man with a bow. Could be a hunter. Could be Gilgamesh. Could be Steve. Historians still argue about whether Nimrod was based on a composite of Mesopotamian kings. Some lean toward Sargon of Akkad, the empire builder. Others prefer Tukulti-Ninurta Tories, a real Assyrian king with a big name and an even bigger god complex. Neither wore the Nimrod label, but the myth machine doesn't mind. It blends, it borrows, it builds. You visit a museum next, wandering glass cases that hold pieces of cities Nimrod supposedly ruled. Babylonian bricks stamped with Nebuchadnezzar's name, tablets detailing trade in Uruk, a dusty map marking Colony, with a question mark so passive-aggressive it hurts. You stare into the eyes of a statue-broken nose, missing arm, regal posture. Could be Nimrod. Could be any of 100 kings who thought they'd never be forgotten. You touch the glass. Cold. Silent. The archaeologists keep digging. With every layer, the chance of finding Nimrod gets slimmer. But here's the kicker. He's already been found. Not in the dirt, but in story, thimble, suspicion. You turn to leave the site and hear someone yell, "We've got something." You freeze. Rush over. It's a jar with a crack in it. You sigh. Walk back to your tent. Because the truth is, Nimrod was never going to be found with a shovel. You can't excavate a legend. You can't carbon date a metaphor. And yet, you still hope. Because something about him lingers in the ziggurats, in the myths, in the unanswered questions. In the spaces where stories hide, it's getting late. And your feet ache from the long, slow walk across millennia. You've climbed Nimrod's towers, ducked under his banners, listened to his curses, and seen him reborn as cartoon fodder and comic book bot. But now, standing at the edge of this journey, it's time to zoom out to ask the big, lingering question. Why does Nimrod still matter? You sit on a cracked stone ledge that probably used to be something grand, a gate, maybe, or a palace foundation. Around you, dust swirls lazily in the evening light, and high above, the sky looks down, still out of reach, still unpunched. Let's start with something basic. Rebels don't go quietly. Nimrod's story was never about duration. It's about impact. A man who shows up in just a few lines of scripture and somehow dominates imaginations for centuries. That's not an accident. That's an archetype. Here's your mainstream insight. All throughout myth and history, we build recurring character types. Tricksters, lovers, warriors, rebels. And Nimrod is the original template for the ambition hit ceiling model. He wants too much, climbs too high, ends too hard. And yet, people keep rooting for him. Not openly, but quietly, secretly. Because part of you, yes, you wants to know, what if he had succeeded? What if the tower had reached the clouds? What if humanity had unified, built together, aimed higher not against God, but beside him? That's the haunting beauty of the Nimrod myth. It dares you to wonder if rebellion was ever just a different kind of faith. You lean back, remembering all those Nimrod echoes from previous sections. The megacities, the skyscrapers, the digital towers of modern ambition. The story keeps getting retold because the craving doesn't change. We still want to rise, even when we know what happened last time. Here's your quirky pinch of trivia. In some esoteric Christian traditions, there's a claim that the Antichrist will be a reincarnation of Nimrod, a resurrected empire builder who reappears at the end of days to finish what Babel started. Again, no biblical confirmation, just ancient speculation written in the margins by monks with strong opinions and no bedtime. It's extreme, but it tells you something. Nimrod is a symbol of the cycle. Build, fall, build again, a loop we can't break. Every time humanity forgets humility, someone starts drawing up tower blueprints. Historians still argue about what the Babel narrative was meant to teach. Some say it's a warning against pride. Others see it as a defense of linguistic and cultural diversity, an origin story for why we're scattered and separate. A few even view it as ancient satire. Look how ridiculous humans are when they try to be gods. But one thing is clear, Nimrod wasn't just punished. He was remembered, and that's where his power lies. Not in what he built, but in what he represented. Every leader who centralizes too much power, every society that overreaches, every dreamer who forgets to look down before stacking the next brick. You glance at your phone. Notifications, updates, algorithms that tower higher every day. Built not of stone, but of code. We don't climb anymore with stairs, we climb with servers. Babel Dwui, zero is already humming in your pocket. And somewhere, spiritually speaking, Nimrod's watching, maybe smirking, maybe planning a comeback. You can almost hear him. Build it taller. They'll remember you. But then you remember Abraham? And that's the real tension, isn't it? Two paths. Nimrod's build without God. Abraham's walk with him. One gathers people through force and fire. The other through faith and promises made under stars. And you're still sitting on the ledge, dust in your hair, trying to decide whether to climb or wait, to build or believe. That's why Nimrod endures, because he's not just in the past. He's a choice you make every day. The wind sighs low across the plain where once a tower stood. You're no longer walking. You're wandering. The weight of Nimrod's story clings to you like dusk soft, quiet, heavy in its own way. You glance behind you. There's no city now. No furnace. No chisel ringing out against stone. Just earth and sky, and the echoes of bricks that once aimed to scrape heaven. It's time to say goodbye, but not with a bang. This final stretch isn't about fire or rebellion. It's about what remains when empires crumble and myths settle into dust. It's about you, here, now, standing at the place where history softens into memory. You sit, no throne, no walls, just a patch of warm earth and your thoughts. And you remember everything you've seen. You remember the boy Nimrod, eyes bright, building traps in the dirt. The young king, spear in hand, dreaming of walls taller than fear. The ruler who dared to stack bricks into the blue and command the sky to notice. You remember the crowds, their single language, the moment it fractured, the thousand voices that split the world. You remember Abraham walking away from the fire, unsinged and unwavering. You remember a mosquito, a painting, a cartoon, a spaceship named Nimrod floating silently through a fictional void. And it hits you. He didn't vanish. He scattered. Like language, like legacy. Here's the last quirky gem you carry with you in some Ethiopian folk songs. Nimrod's name is invoked not as a tyrant, but as a warning whispered to children who talk too big, dream too fast. Don't be a Nimrod. They sing, don't chase clouds. And maybe that's what we've been doing all along. Not chasing clouds, but meaning, because Nimrod isn't just a man, a myth, or a meme. He's the shadow cast by aspiration. The tension between reaching and overreaching, between building and believing. Historians still argue yes, even here at the end, whether Nimrod was real, symbolic, or some third thing beyond both. But the stories remain, and stories, as you've now seen, are the only kind of immortality we ever really get. The stars begin to blink in above you now, like distant torches lit one by one. No tower reaches for them. Just silence. Just space. You let out a breath you didn't realize you were holding. And with that breath, we close Nimrod's book not with certainty, but with curiosity intact. Because somewhere out there, someone else is building. And somewhere deep inside you, a brick still waits to be stacked. The air has cooled. The last of the light has gone soft and gold, trailing across the landscape like a memory you don't want to forget just yet. You've walked far tonight, through cities and ruins, through whispers and fire, through ancient texts and modern rewrites, through truth, and truth dressed in story's clothing. Your eyes are heavy now, that good kind of heavy earned, not forced. Let them drift for a moment. You're safe here. No towering ambition pressing on your shoulders. No rebellion humming beneath your feet. Just the steady, ancient rhythm of the world breathing slowly, waiting patiently. You imagine a tower that never fell, one not built of brick or bitumen, but of moments, kindnesses, choices made when no one's watching. That's a tower no god would need to shatter. That's a legacy that whispers, not shouts. Let your breath slow. Let your thoughts wander, no need to climb. No need to conquer. If Nimrod taught us anything, it's that the sky doesn't owe us anything. And yet, somehow, it keeps letting us look up. You've earned your rest. The world can wait until morning. Close your eyes. Let silence rise like a soft wall around you. You're not lost. You're exactly where you're meant to be.